Mixing and mastering. What are they and why do you need them? Let's imagine you're a musician and you've recorded a song on your computer. It has drums, bass, two guitars, left and right, synthesizers, various sound effects, and vocals. And from an arrangement perspective, everything seems to sound fine. But when you play your song right after top chart hits, you realize that everything is a bit off in your version. You can't hear the kick drum because of the bass, the guitars are muffled, the sound effects are much louder than the music, and while you can sort of hear the vocals, you can't distinguish the lyrics. When you, yourself, try to increase the volume of a kick, the bass vanishes. You turn up the vocals, and yes, finally you can hear the words. But as a side effect, you get that karaoke effect. I mean, a shouting voice layered over the music that feels entirely detached. Something in the arrangement randomly hums in a weird way. The guitar is whistling sometimes, and most importantly, the entire song lacks so-called cohesion. You can't exactly explain what's wrong, but you feel like all the instruments are just mashed together. Instead of giving the impression of a polished song, similar to what you hear on streaming services, yours sounds more like a live recording from a rehearsal space. Everything sounds and feels this way because your track is not mixed. And that is why it's time to export all your tracks one by one and hand them over to a highly trained individual, known as a mixing engineer. They will find and cut the frequencies on the bass instrument that are overlapping with the kick, but in return, they will carefully boost the bass sound somewhere else. They will compress only those instruments that require it, and leave the ones that already sound good as they are. They'll add delay, chorus, and reverb exactly where they belong, pan the guitars to left and right, and process the vocals so that they really feel like a part of the song. And you will finally be able to distinguish the lyrics. Not a single audio track will be too loud or too quiet. At any given moment, the listener will be able to focus their attention on the instrument that caught their ear and hear every single detail. But if the creative vision calls for it, the mixing engineer will even intentionally make certain individual tracks or sections of the song louder or quieter to manipulate the listener's emotions. A mixing engineer knows that a song isn't just a collection of instruments playing simultaneously. It's an imaginary stage performance, a psychoacoustic trick simulating the placement of virtual musicians across an invisible concert hall inside the listener's head. And if you haven't studied the theory behind this process and haven't spent years practicing mixing tracks, you most likely won't achieve anything relying on intuition alone. By the way, mixing is one of the few areas in music production where, to this day, there are almost no one-stop-shop artificial intelligence solutions. Indeed, there are AI assistants that can help you create a rough draft, but as of recording this video, I am personally not aware of any solutions to which you can feed several dozen tracks, press one button, and get a song ready for mastering 5 minutes later. There are far too many variables, way too many emotional revisions from clients like make it more punchy or the vocals feel flat. This profession demands deep empathy and, quite often, borderline mind reading. Trust me, I'm serious. But wait, there's also something called mastering, right? At the beginning of this video, we discussed why mixing is necessary. It makes a song cohesive, pleasant to hear, and clearly expresses the artist's vision. But something is still missing. Consistency across different tracks on the same album and compliance with industry standards. Let's compare the mindset of a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer. When a mixing engineer mixes a track, they primarily think about expressing the core idea of that specific song, the overall cohesion of the sound, and the clarity of the instruments. They work within the context of their own studio and their own gear. A mixing engineer might keep in mind some commercial tracks as a reference, but they are not obligated to blindly follow them. A mixing engineer can easily break the rules on purpose to create an experimental sound. But as a result, when you compile a whole album of all these creative visions, you might end up in a situation where one song is mixed well and another not so much. Some tracks might have been mixed by entirely different people, some songs came out louder, others quieter, one track has a deep sub-bass, two others basically have no bass as an instrument in the arrangement at all, and the last track is the only song featuring female vocals. In order to ensure that all these songs sound cohesive, it feels like they all belong to the same album, it is pleasant to transition between them both in terms of volume and timbre, You need to pass the whole batch of tracks to one person, the mastering engineer, not the mixing engineer. They will fix minor imperfections left after the mixing stage and will make sure that the final version of the track sounds as consistent as possible across different types of playback systems, from massive concert halls to smartphones and headphones. This is called mix translation. The final loudness of the track is pumped up by the mastering engineer as well. This is the reason why a song gets sent to the label by them, not by the mixing engineer. Here is the metaphor. If the mixing engineer is the artist who painted the wooden piece, the mastering engineer is the one who applies the varnish. Let me know in the comments if you can think of a better analogy. During mastering, tracks are volume matched against each other and against other recognized songs in the genre, and they are brought to a similar tonal balance. If the mixing engineer spends their whole workday trying to make tracks of a single song get along with each other, the mastering engineer tries to make the songs of an album or genre get along. This brings up a popular question. Why do you need mastering for a single? First, as I mentioned earlier, mastering fixes minor imperfections and resolves translation issues. Second, even a single will still end up in playlists and charts. It will eventually be played right next to tracks in a similar genre, which means it shouldn't be noticeably louder or quieter, and its tonal balance shouldn't be too different. The trained ear of a mixing engineer is focused on individual musical instruments and working with the virtual soundstage. Meanwhile, the trained ear of a mastering engineer is focused on industry standards, loudness trends, and the tonal characteristics of different genres. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that the exact same mixed track can be mastered differently for different purposes. There's one standard for TV, another for streaming, and third for live concerts. And even though indie artists try to save money and expect both mixing and mastering as a single package from one person, in the ideal world of professional audio, it should always be two different people, simply because they have different specializations, different studio gear, and most importantly, different critical listening skills. But why did we even need mixing in the first place? You can rewatch the video from the beginning.